Good evening. So, how many people have no idea who I am? So, my name is Tim Freke. It really is pronounced Freke. It's an old West Country name. I realize I'm speaking in English. I appreciate you all letting me do that. If I speak too fast and get too excited, just wave and say, Tim, slow down. Because I really want you to understand what I'm going to say. So I've been talking with the Conscious Club, and they invited me to come across, which was very nice. And last week they said, oh, we haven't quite got the numbers that we anticipated booked in. Do you still want to come? And I thought about it, and I thought, well, I had this feeling that it wouldn't just be any 20 people. It would be you. And that as it was you, I would definitely come. So I decided to be completely stupid and crazy and get in a plane and come across through the winds and the gales. So I'm absolutely determined that we can have a really significant night to warrant your bravery coming out in these elements and my craziness coming across from England. So we've got an hour and a half to do something really important, I think. The world which we inhabit is very beautiful and full of suffering. And I find myself unable to do much about nearly all of the suffering in the world. I don't have the skills and the talent to help with all of the practical problems that everyone faces. But it does seem to me that everything we do and everything we experience comes from our underlying philosophy, what we think life is. And luckily I'm a philosopher, so I can do something about that. So I've been dedicating the last period of my life to seeing if it's possible to develop a new philosophy, a new worldview, a new way of understanding the nature of reality, which can really help us move into a new phase, individually and collectively, can make things better. And the reason I decided it was worth coming is because I hope that these ideas may be as valuable to you as they are to me. Normally, when I've been coming to Amsterdam, I've been coming here to run practical events, to talk about awakening and to help people experience what spirituality is really about. But tonight I'm going to do something different. I'm going to talk about my new book, which I will just wave around for a moment. Soul Story, which is incredibly good, and you want to rush afterwards because there's not enough for everybody. Because I couldn't get them in my case, so it's going to be like whoosh, straight to the table, because you're going to want one. Soul Story, which is called Evolution of the Purpose of Life. And in it I explore a new philosophy I call emergent spirituality, and that's what I want to talk to you about tonight. So this is an evening of philosophy, but for me philosophy isn't something abstract. It may seem abstract at first, but when you start realizing that everything you experience every day comes from how you see reality. And when people think they haven't got a philosophy, it's because they're just living unconsciously in the philosophy that's around them, in their subculture or their culture. And for me, just as a curious human being, let alone as a philosopher, it feels to me we need a new understanding. Now, hey, before I go into a whole load of ideas and play with all of that, I want to make one thing really clear. For me, all of what I'm about to say is based on a fundamental appreciation of something really obvious and indisputable to me, which is that what we're in here is profoundly mysterious. That what's happening right now is a breathtaking mystery, which actually nobody understands. And when we think we do, we're actually farthest from the truth, because we really don't. That this gigantic universe which we live in on this short journey from birth to death, having this experience of consciousness, is a mystery of such magnitude. And everything that I want to say to you can never replace that. But as human culture has developed, we've come up with different stories, different ways of understanding this thing we're in. Stories which may or may not give it significance. And we need stories. Every day we live from a story. The story of who we are, the story of what life is, the story of what the universe is, even if it's just in the background. So what I want to do is go, look, here we are, my friends, in this breathtaking mystery together. I don't know what it is. I'm guessing you don't know. I've met a lot of very clever human beings. Not one of them, it turns out, knows what this is. I've read a huge number of books. Turns out nobody knows what this is. Given that, let's do our best to understand it in the deepest, most expansive way we can. Let's take all of the great ideas that everyone else has come up with already, find the best version we can today, and then pass that on to our children to do better with. That we can do. And in that spirit, I'd like to share this new worldview that I've come to your country to talk about. So why do I need a new worldview? Well, a bit like an artist, I think, creates for themselves and then hopes that other people will like it. As a philosopher, I'm a bit like that. I'm looking for a philosophy for me, which I hope you may like. Because I need one. I need to understand what this is. And the problem or do my best. And the problem I face is that my experience of life is incredibly paradoxical, incredibly ambiguous. So on the one hand, life is very cause and effect. It's going to drop, it's going to drop, it's going to drop. It's, you know what, this is just going to go on. And there's a level of life which is very gritty, kind of brutal, kind of meaningless. And that's an area of life I find that physics has understood incredibly, well enough that it can fly me across the ocean to see you. Well enough that it can connect us on the internet. Just incredible. Understanding that cause and effect world of physics. But also, on the other extreme, my experience of life is that sometimes it's utterly magical. Sometimes things happen which are just the synchronicities, as after Carl Jung called them, those moments where it's all of that. Sometimes when I enter these deep awake states very profoundly, when I'm in spiritual practice, or just because it happens, or because I'm with you, it's like when that happens, there is powerful intuitions that arise in me that this thing we're in is hugely important, that my life isn't just some meandering waste of time. It's actually significant, and your life is significant. And that there's a goodness here. So, my dilemma is, how do those sit together? How can that both be true? Or do I have to choose between the two? And I see many people in our culture choose between the two. So I know a lot of people who've just gone, look, really, all of that's just an illusion. It's really just this. And that has become, in my own lifetime, the dominant worldview in our culture. I've seen it growing and growing and growing. Not amongst the majority of people, but amongst the intellectual culture. That is now the hegemony. That's the way it's seen. That's objectivist scientist view. Incredibly powerful at understanding the cosmos. I mean, extraordinary what it's done in just a few hundred years. But there's small print. It's like, I love it when I watch the documentaries on the TV, I'm sure you get them, and it's like the wonders of the universe and the wonders of life, and it is wonderful. And you look at it, and science has shown us these wonders, and then the small print is, oh, but by the way, the universe exists for no reason. It's a complete happen chance, chaotic thing, It's very, very big. You're very, very small. You're going to last for a few years, and then you're dead, and that's it. So the vision of life, the underlying thing which is in our culture right now, is what is life? Life is basically, what the... gone. That's what it is. Well, if we live believing that, we're going to live a certain type of life. Because that is actually a very brutal version of what reality is. And it doesn't fit with this, which is, no, this is incredibly important and significant, and what really matters is love and all sorts of spiritual values, which seem very powerful to me. But what I see here is a whole load of people who go off into that and go, I don't know, I won't even think about all of that science. So you get the classic thing of people talking about how bad that is and how everything is just happening through intention, and you can have the life you want if you just believe hard enough, and science is rubbish, and they're speaking through microphones, and they're flying around the world in planes, and they're on the internet, and they're just going, don't think about that. So what I want to do is suggest that there's a way that this links together. And the key to it, I think, is an idea which originates in spirituality, but which has been picked up and hugely magnified by science, which is the idea of evolution. The essential idea I want to share with you is this. We now know, as much as we know anything, the evidence is overwhelming, that this universe has been evolving for 13.8 billion years. It's an incredible thought, guys, isn't it? Just to take that in. A few hundred years ago, Darwin and Wallace came up with this breathtaking idea that all life had evolved from one basic life form. In one way, it's saying that all life is one organism. All life, I mean, what an idea. And that it was through this process of some natural selection or some such process. But that is, so that suddenly the world which our ancestors lived in, which was fixed, things were created, that's what they were. Suddenly everything's in motion. No, nothing's fixed. Everything's becoming and changing. And you have this biological revolution with this idea of evolution, which has been endorsed again and again and again and again. And in some form, it's definitely happening. And then 100 years ago, this astonishing idea, actually first posited by a Catholic priest, bizarrely, but now accepted overwhelmingly by the scientific community, that it's not just biology, not just life that's evolved, the whole friggin' universe has evolved. Everything has evolved from one simple singularity, from one beginning. So this is one thing turning into many things. Now, the standard idea you get in science is, it started with the Big Bang. The Big Bang, by the way, is a really bad idea, a bad name. It's a joke name. It's an insult name. Because it wasn't big. It was very, very small. And there was no bang. So what really happened 13.8 years ago is the universe started. And what started was time. Time started. And it's been going on for 13.8 billion years. And for the first 10, we saw the evolution of the physical universe. From hydrogen to... And then here, on this particular planet, 4 billion years ago, we saw the beginning of life. And then we had life. And then at some point in that, we had the emergence of something completely new. The whole way through, we've seen the emergence of new things all the time. New things, new things, new things, new things, new things, new things. The latest thing, the newest thing, is psyche. The newest thing is that the existence of this experience you're having right now, of imagination or mind or psyche. And psyche is the Greek word for soul. This is what soul means. Soul is not some weird thing that's going to pop out your head when you die. Soul is referring to its original meaning is just referring to something completely obvious. You know, it's impossible for people not to have a soul because you're experiencing it right now. So right now you're experiencing two things, yes? You're experiencing a world of sensation with the body, and you're experiencing another dimension of experience of the psyche, of the soul. And that's not in space, is it? You can't say where it is. It just doesn't exist in space. It's a different dimension of experience. And what exists in it is not made of matter. It's made of images, thoughts, mind stuff. So we're in this very interesting predicament, it seems to me, where we've gone 13.8 billion years ago with the beginnings of matter through life to soul. Something which is material ending up with something which is not material. Now, what biology and science does is it goes, there's a physical universe evolved, the biological universe evolved, oh, and then there's this other side effect of it, which is the psyche, the mind. And it's a kind of a side effect of the brain. We don't really understand what that is. What I want to suggest essentially to you, my friends, is very simple, which is that we need to see, just as 100 years ago, science went, oh my God, it's not just biology that's evolved, there's been a whole pre-biological phase of evolution. We now need to go, oh look, there's a post-biological phase of evolution. And that's the evolution of soul. So that rather than seeing this incredible experience which we're having as some arbitrary, strange byproduct of a piece of meat, we understand it as we actually experience it, which is that it's a whole dimension of reality. Another dimension of reality has emerged. And if, as I have done in my life, you explore that dimension, it's huge in there. If you meditate, if you journey, if you do shamanism, if you take ayahuasca, if you do 100 things, and you go into soul, it's not just this bit we're experiencing now, where we're having this conversation in it. It's actually a whole dimension. Now, so what I'm doing with science and spirituality is essentially is this. It's going, look, guys, what I would like science to do is consider the possibility that evolution didn't end with biology. That actually it's evolved beyond biology into soul evolution. And all of the evolutionary currents are mainly happening there now, and have been for quite some time. As a domain, the imagination, not as something unreal, but as something super real, more real, or the most emergent level of reality. What I'm saying to spirituality is the opposite. Because this realm, the realm of soul, that's what spirituality has always been studying. That's where there is meaning. One way you can get that right now is just, and this is kind of fun, I think, is if you look at me now and become very conscious of what you're seeing biologically, what you're seeing in the world of sensation, and what you're seeing is a monkey with clothes on making funny noises. Can you see that? It's just a funny monkey making funny noises. It's hard not to hear the meaning, though, in the funny noises. But there's no meaning in the noises. These are just noises. Blah, 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 blah. If someone didn't speak English in this room, they would just hear noises. But you hear meaning. But the meaning is all in soul. There's no meaning in the world. The meaning all exists in the imagination. It exists in this more emergent level of reality. Not just meaning, but also I want to go on and suggest the magic of life, the narrative, the story that we experience our lives to be, are all qualities that have emerged. I'll go into all of that later. Let me just say what I want to say to spirituality, and then we'll go into it. What I want to say to spirituality is the opposite. It's to say, look, nearly every spiritual tradition. Well, firstly, let's be clear. The vast majority of spiritual traditions in the world were created by human beings who thought the world was flat. They're very old. And for some bizarre reason, the older they are, the more seriously they get taken. I don't know why that would possibly be. You know, Plato was a very clever man, but he also thought that the brain was a cooling system for the blood. I really don't want him to operate on my brain. The idea that the ancients knew better than us, I think, is complete and absolute nonsense. I think they just opened up territory for us. And some of them were incredibly wise and did amazing things, made it possible for us to think new thoughts. But I don't think, I think it needs to evolve. So that's the first thing I want to say to spirituality. Stop fetishizing the old, and let's actually let this evolve into what it needs to be today. And nearly all of those old traditions are actually fundamentally anti-life. Nearly all of them. Not all, but nearly all. Many of them. What I mean by that is that they see this soul experience, which they're having, and which they're going off and exploring, and right from the early shamans, they've been going off into it and going, hey, there's a whole world out here. They see that as pre-existing the universe. Soul exists before universe. So we've fallen from that. So this myth of evolution, they have the opposite. They have the myth of the fall. We pre-existed in some lovely heavenly realm, and then there was a huge fuck-up, and we've ended up here. And now we're screwed. And what we need to do is purify ourselves. Purify ourselves of everything which ties us here. Purify ourselves of pleasure, of attachments, of emotion, of the mind, of our identity at all, of sex. We need to get away from here, and if we do that strongly enough, when we die, we'll go back to La La Land, and we'll never have to come back here to this shithole. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically Hinduism. And many others. Early Christianity too, actually. Lots of them, nearly all of them. What I'm trying to say playfully is, look, this view here is this pre-exists, we've fallen. What I want to say to science is soul is a whole level of emergence. What I want to say to spirituality is everything has evolved, including everything you associate with soul. That is an evolutionary product which has come from these very simple beginnings. It doesn't pre-exist, it emerges like a flower at the end of the process. And what that enables me to do is say there is one stream of expanding time which leads to this whole level, this new level of soul. And at each point, new things have emerged. Emergence is a key buzz phrase in evolutionary studies right now. It's a very good word too. It's the simple idea that there's novelty, creativity. So we got hydrogen, the beginning, but at some point hydrogen and oxygen get it on, and we have water for the very first time. There's H2O. There was no water. Now there is. At a certain point, there is no life, and then basic life forms arise for the very first time, and then there's life. And then simple cells get it together, and there's the first multicellular organism. And then they get it together with others, and the next thing you know, there's sensation for the first time. Something in the universe can react to light or listen, and then there's color. Before that, there was no color. And then there was color, because there were eyes. And they could relate to the waves of light and go and experience it as color for the very first time. And then for the very first time, there was thought and imagination. Not just sensation, not just seeing it, but imagining seeing it. Each new thing, seeing the emergence of new qualities. With the emergence of biology, for the very first time, you get life. And with that, death. You don't look at carbon atoms and talk about them dying or living. That comes with life and death. What I want to suggest to you is the qualities that I pointed out about life, which make it very wow. The spiritual qualities of life have emerged with this level of soul. This is where the narrative of life, the meaning of life, the magic of life, and also, and importantly, the immortality of the soul. A lot of people trying to tie science and spirituality together. And one of the problems I found with nearly all of them is that no one mentions probably the most important idea in spirituality, which is that when you die, you don't. Which is when, well, with this simple understanding I'm giving you of body and soul as the two things you're experiencing right now, it enables us to ask the question about life after death really simply. So the question, it seems to me, is, and look at it in your experience right now, when this experience you're having of body, of sensation, when that runs its course and it dies, and sensation ceases, does imagination cease also? That's the question. Now, if it's a side effect of the body, and that's all it is, obviously the answer is yes. And that's the current model. And it's so strong that in my experience, if I get up at scientific conferences and I go, no, I actually think it's completely irrational to believe in the immortal soul, I'm treated like an idiot. It's like you're a wishful thinking idiot. That's impossible. What I want to suggest to you is not impossible at all. It's just the way we're looking at things. And that this immortality is an emergent quality of the universe. Just like colour, or water, or anything else, or life itself, and death itself. All these things have emerged gradually. All right, so I've sowed the seeds of immortality. I'm going to come back to that, because that's kind of sexy, and everyone wants to know about death. But first I want to talk about time. The whole of this worldview rests on the foundation of a new look at time. In spiritual circles, people often say time is an illusion. I've probably said it myself many times. You might even be able to go through my early books and find me writing it. The truth is, as I've studied it more and more, I have no idea what that means, actually. Because what I see when I look at what is, when I examine reality right now, what I see is time. What I see is change in experience, and that's time. So I want to suggest to you an alternative to that, which is not that time is not an illusion. Actually, time is reality. And it's right in front of us. I'm not asking you to believe a theory, I'm just going, look. There have never been a time when I've not experienced time. There's always been this flow of experience. Always. So now I want to say something about that flow of experience. Because we have a metaphor in English, I presume it's the same in Dutch, which is we say that time passes. And we're so used to saying it we don't even notice it's a metaphor. We think it's just obvious. But the fact is it's not obvious, it's a metaphor. I want to suggest that actually time doesn't pass. There's a much better metaphor to understand the nature of time, which is that actually time accumulates. There is more past now than there was when we started this half an hour ago. There is more past now than when I got on the plane. There's more past now than when you and I learnt to speak. There's more past now than when the solar system was born. There's more past now than when there was the Big Bang. There is always more past. And I want to suggest that the past hasn't gone. We think of it as passing. Oh, God, it's just passing. But I don't think that's quite right. I want to suggest to you that everything that has ever happened is implicitly present in this moment. That the past has accumulated and is always present, implicitly in the present. Everything that has ever happened is implicit now. All of those things I just mentioned, and more. Me getting on the plane, us learning to speak, the development of the solar system, the evolution of life, the Big Bang. If any of that, if anything were missing, this moment would not be this moment. And that the whole of the past has not gone anywhere. So that right now, everything that I've been is present, and everything that you has been is present. Right now, everything that Tim has ever experienced is meeting everything that you've ever experienced. That's what makes us who we are. So what I'm suggesting here, and why I've stopped to talk about time, and why I'm saying it's fundamental, is I'm saying that what comes with the evolutionary understanding is you realize that, in a sense, everything is made of time. Because everything, including you and me, is actually a process. Everything is a process. Things are abstractions, as if they were only in the moment, but they're not. Everything is a process in time, and it's made of its past. The whole universe is made of its past. And what this moment is the meeting of everything that ever has been and everything that could be. This is the meeting of the past and the possible. That's what the present is, which is why every present moment is always a completely new possibility realized. It's never the same, ever. It's always a brand new possibility that's never happened before. And it always includes everything that's ever happened before it. Have you ever had a moment where you went, that's exactly the same as the previous moment? Even if you were to, there would have been the previous moment, which it contained. So it wasn't the same, even when it's similar. So every moment is the past meeting the possible. Here it is again, here it is again, here it is again. So that rather than time passing, time is expanding, like the universe itself. And it's expanding within the possible. And in that process, it's realizing more and more possibilities. So that if we go back to the Big Bang, which is over here, for some reason, moment zero, the beginning of a stream of time. The time stream starts. And that time stream starts, and the information which it contains is constantly accumulating. Which is why there's a tendency towards evolving. Because there's more of it, more complexity. What happens? You see more and more complex forms of life. Starts with simple atoms, turns into the whole chemical zoo. Things become more complex, and more complex, and more complex, because there's more and more information. There's more and more past. So there's a tendency constantly towards, and it's still happening right now. Let me just say a word about evolution, about information, and then we'll head back for immortality. One of the great things which physics has done, one of the things just blows my mind totally, really. Physics, the history of physics is, just so funny. Physics starts off looking at religion and going, geez, that's a lot of mumbo-jumbo. This is what really exists. Let's find out what it is. Yes. And then a whole load of clever men and women look very carefully at what it is for a few decades and then come back to the rest of us and go, okay, we've looked at it and it's not there. That was 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. They came back and went, sorry, it's not there. This whole solidity thing you're experiencing, it's not real in the way we think it is. That's our experience of reality. Ooh. Reality itself, what is it? I mean, physicists today are talking about the universe being like a hologram. Two-dimensional. I mean, isn't that far out? We're having this, and it's like, yeah, you're two-dimensional, and I'm a two-dimensional reality meeting a two-dimensional. That's a pretty good effect, isn't it? So my point is, we need, if we're going to catch up with physics, which is an exciting thing to do, we need to step into a reality where we're going, there is our experience of what is, and then behind it, the objective world is not what we're experiencing. That's our experience of the objective world. And what is the objective world that we're behind what we're experiencing? Well, the closest thing I think we can say right now is it's information. And getting that concept is really helpful, because then you can see that what's been evolving is actually information through different levels. So you've got the time stream, a stream of information forming all these different forms, individuating into all of these different currents, different chemicals, different galaxies, different solar systems. And then life, and then different forms of life, and then different levels of life, and plant life, and bacteria, and then on, mammals, us. And as that's happening, the information is becoming more and more complicated until you go into your brain, which is the most complex thing in the universe as far as we know, and it's so damn complicated, it's more complicated than the star systems. Incredibly complex. And from that, and linked to that, this whole world of images has opened up. So, each level is of information. Let's just deal with that biologically before we go on to the body and the soul, which is to go, it's tempting to think, this is my body, right? It's like my body. But the fact is, I've known Sabina for quite some time now, and when we first met, I had a completely different body, which is an astonishing thought. But when we first met, it was a completely different body to this one. No cells were the same, no atoms were the same. Physically, in terms of its content, it's all changed, completely. Not one piece of matter is the same in my body as when we first met. And yet it's still my body. Why? Because my body's not matter. My body's information, which takes in all of that stuff and turns it into body. And just constantly, matter is passing through me. But I'm the information which holds it all together, which is why if you were to take Tim and then dissolve him down into all to the chemicals that make him up and have a pile of chemicals, it would not be the same as having me here talking to you. It would be quite a different experience. If you were sitting there with the chemicals, it would be like, it's a bit of a disappointment. I thought he was going to say something, but it's just sitting there. Is that really Tim? Because it's not really Tim, because Tim's information on a different level. So, in that spirit, what I want to suggest to you, and this is very shorthand because we haven't got that long together. You'll have to read the book and do all the other stuff to get the full story. What I want to suggest to you is that information has arisen on these physical levels, the biological levels, and the soul level. And the soul level, which you're experiencing right now, have a look, is a non-material level. It just is. It's just not made of matter. It's made of mind stuff. You disappear off into it at night. It's not the world of sensation. It's a different world. It's a different dimension of reality, which has arisen from this dimension of reality. And it's therefore a different level of information. So the question is, can that information survive when this information ends? And a simple metaphor for what I have in mind came to me while I was writing the book. Actually, it came to me after I finished writing the book, which is why it's not in the book. But I think it's a shame it's not in it, because it's quite a good metaphor. So I'll give it to you. It's a little extra. So I'm sitting there on my computer and I'm thinking, oh, this is a great metaphor. This is exactly what I'm trying to say about information, because it looks like the information for my book is on the computer that I'm working on. There it is, ones and zeros. We all know all about information now, which can create whole realities, as we know. And it looked like if I was to drop my coffee on the computer or drop it or something and it broke, all of that information would be gone, be finished. But actually, what was actually happening was that all the information was actually going to the cloud. So if that were to happen, the information hadn't gone anywhere. Well, it was still there. Where was it? Well, it's not local. My computer's local. It's in there. But it's not just in there. It is also in the cloud. It's on another level of information. And if you look at your experience right now, you can see that Tim is local. I see that. He's here. And the information is clearly linked to my body right now. But it is also in the cloud. It is also in a non-material dimension, which I'm experiencing quite clearly. So the way that we can start thinking about immortality and making sense of the literally hundreds of thousands of reports from near-death experiences which we have now, I mean, it's not speculative. I mean, huge numbers of incredibly detailed reports of what people have experienced at their deaths. We can start to make sense of those. It seems to me, if we see that these two levels, which are linked at the moment, are actually capable of being independent levels of information. So what I'm suggesting is that with the death of the body, information in soul is able to maintain itself. What I'm really suggesting, which is kind of, I find fascinating, is that the dimension we experience after death, the dimension that people enter into at near-death experiences, has itself evolved. I'm saying heaven has evolved, to use a controversial word. And if you look at people's experiences or what they believed happened after death or what they reported after death through history, I wrote a book about this many years ago, you can actually kind of see it evolving. Because people's view of the after death start in the Greeks and sometimes with the Jews, and it's all very shadowy and like hardly formed. A world of shades. But that will develop into an imaginary world which is like this life but perfect. So the drinking halls of Valhalla. So you're a warrior, but it's perfect. And the hunting is endless. And it's a projection of, in the imagination. Why? Because it is the imagination. It's a dream. But not a dream as, but a dream as a more emergent level of reality, which has its own reality. And then when religions start up, you get these huge temples with Buddhas and choirs of angels, and all of that religious imagery starts emerging. And now with near-death experiences, you get everything. You get cultural stuff, but you get cross-cultural stuff. You get cities and gardens and flying and God knows what. Why? Because what we're entering into is a world of images. So what I'm suggesting is we've first seen the evolution of the cosmos, and then we've seen the evolution of what I call, for want of a better word, the imaginos. A realm of the imagination, which is the flowering of the evolutionary current. That's where it's been leading. Okay, there's a kind of another slightly further to go to the end of that story, but I'm going to hold that. And maybe we'll come back to it just before we end, if we have some time. And I'd like to finish off this bit of the presentation, and then we can chat, talking about purpose. Trying to relate how that relates to you and me in the middle of all this. Well, the first thing about it is it seems to me it is a very, very grand and beautiful narrative. And it's a narrative which includes everything I experience. So because all of those levels of reality coexist right now. It's not one or the other, it's all of them. So there's the physical level, that's still happening, and I have to live with it. You know, if I want to fly home, it's got to obey the laws of physics. And it doesn't matter how much I sit there wishing it can happen, it's not going to happen. You've got to obey the laws of physics. And then there's biology, and I'm stuck with Tim, and, you know, having a body's great some of the time, and other time, you know, but I need to feed him, and I need to wash him, and I need to do all the... And he's getting a bit older now, and it's going to fall to bits eventually. And, you know, it's like, it's the way of biology. There we go. It's the way it is. I have to live with that. And then, at the same time, there's meaning and magic, and when I said it was going to be you, that's why I came, I meant that. Because I think it's going to be worth coming to be with you. I really feel that. Because there's a kind of, because we have intuitions and meaning and soul and beyond death. And that feeling that it's okay. This whole damn thing is okay. Why is it okay? Because it's moving towards something better all the time. It's moving towards something better. Fundamentally, it's an evolutionary emergence. So all of that is happening at the same time. Not one or the other, but the whole thing. And we have to negotiate all of that. Purpose. It's a real no-no. In science, the idea that the universe has a purpose, they really don't like that because it sounds, again, it's one of those things you mustn't say, because it smacks of God. Smacks of a big guy at the front who's going, yes, I'm going to do this, and they don't want that, and I agree with them, actually. I don't want that either. It doesn't make sense. We can get into that later. But I do think we can talk about purpose. And I think we can talk about purpose because I don't think purpose is something the universe has. I think the purpose is something which is intrinsic to its nature, if we understand what its nature is. So let's go back here with our arbitrary point of moment zero and ask a very strange question, which is, what comes before moment zero? Now, it's an impossible question because there is no before. But what we can say perhaps is, what is it that the time stream is arising from? What is the time stream arising from? And it seems to me, all we can say, to make any sense of it, is that the universe is coming from the potentiality for the universe. That what pre-exists the universe is the potentiality for everything that has evolved. So the universe has come from the potentiality for hydrogen, and the potentiality for galaxies, and snails, and frogs, and giraffes, and rock and roll, and holocausts, and you and me having this conversation, and everything. So that this process of the time stream is the realization of potentiality. That's what it is. The universe, which is made of time, is the realization of potentiality. That's its nature. And because it's evolutionary, because the past accumulates, it's realizing potentiality in more and more emergent ways all the time. So it can't go straight to soul. That's too complex. It has to start with hydrogen and work its way up. But it does. It manifests more and more emergent potentialities. That's what the whole evolutionary current is. Don't forget, I was talking about this moment. What is it? It's the meeting of everything that has been and the potentiality. That's what it is. And new potentialities are being manifested in every second. And through that possibility, deeper and deeper, more emergent potentials are arising until the most emergent potential to have arisen so far seems to be soul. That we're here having this conversation. That we have meaning. That I can be telling you this story. All of that. So it seems to me that this worldview is important, not just for linking everything together, not important because it can come in and it says, look, your life is not just here and gone. It is actually something which is that your very nature is to be immortal. It's just your nature of soul. Just as the nature of body is not to be. The nature of soul is to be, because it's more emergent. That's its nature. It can't die. It just can't. It's not made of matter. It's not biological. And to entertain that possibility and how that changes the perception, especially if you get that as a really credible, robust idea, not just as a fluty, wouldn't that be nice if? And to say that your purpose is very deep, because you are an expression of that time stream, which has evolved to this incredibly emergent level of soul. And it seems to me that therefore what my purpose is and what your purpose is to carry on the purpose of the universe, which is to realize new potentialities in the most emergent ways. So what would it be for us? And each one of us is unique. And what makes us unique is our own past. What makes me, me, and you, is our past. So what that means for me is going to be different to what it means for you. But where it's the same is it's going, what would it be to realize the most emergent potentialities in your soul? Because that's what this wants. That's what this is. What would it be to realize the most emergent potentialities in your soul stream, in the time stream which you are, a soul? Because that's the purpose that the universe has been fulfilling for 13.8 billion years. Now, one of the things about understanding that as the purpose of life, or the purpose of the whole of the universe, is that you can't possibly fail to do it. It's happening whether you like it or not. It's just happening. It's happening now. You are forming yourself. What I'm suggesting is that because we are made of time, you are in a process of soul formation. You are forming what you are. In every second, you are forming what you are. This is now part of you. Forever. Well, always will be. We're in each other now. Everything that's ever happened is part of you. So every day you live, you form yourself a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more. And you're more and more distinct, and more you, more and more particular. And the whole journey, if you think about it from the very beginning, has been about everything becoming more and more particular, more and more individual. And you're on a very, very individuated level of this. And you're forming yourself. The difference is, at the level that we've arrived at, we can consciously engage with that process. You cannot go through life just forming, which generally means repeating the things you did yesterday, so that the evolution is very slow. That's what the universe has spent most of its time doing that, which is why it's taking 30.8 billion years. Most days it just does the same thing it did the day before. And very occasionally there's something new and the whole thing changes. But it's very occasional. But with you and I, we can do new things all the time. I've never said that sentence before. It's a new thing. I've never talked to you before. It's a new thing. We can choose to live creative, emergent lives because we have the power of choice, because we have the creativity of the universe in us. The creativity it all came from is in us. So where this philosophy of emergent spirituality ends with is, look, there's one process in which everything has evolved. Everything. And it's taken us from basic matter through to something which is not made of matter. It's taken us through to this experience of soul, which is where all the action's happening now. All of the action. And now what we're doing is we're taking things from soul and bringing it back here. Like, look around you. Everything has come from soul. It's all ideas. So that was an idea. The chair is an idea. The concrete, idea. Doors, idea. Plants, not biological. Underneath it, flower pot, idea. Clothes, idea. Glasses, idea. Everything. We're just like living inside the imagination in this level, let alone this level. And the whole evening, you've sat your bodies down, biologically just been inert. I've done this waving hands thing I have to do. But basically all the action has been taking place in imagination, in soul. That's where all the action is. That's where we want to be. So what it's saying is, look, the process we're in, for me, is not arbitrary. It's not just a waste of time. It's actually something incredibly profound. It's the realization of potentiality. That's what it is. And we're at this cutting edge in that process. And we are part of that process. And we can consciously engage with that process by seeking to realize the most potential, emergent potentials within us. So that your life really matters. Really matters. Because you are the cosmos. You are the universe at this level of emergence, realizing itself. And behind you, you are 13.8 billion years old. You go back a long way. But you've reached this place. And that what we're in is magnificent beyond comprehension, actually. And if we could bring that vision and that philosophy in, if we could replace this narrow, scientific, macho, it's just this, which is literally soul-destroying. And if we could take this floaty spirituality, it's like I want it to be like this, and go, no, root yourself in some rational thinking and if we could pull those two together, we could have a philosophy which could transform the future of humanity. We could, between us, form a way of seeing what reality is, which creates such a vision of what we're alive for and what we're doing and why it matters. And why it matters that we're constantly taking it to a new level. So that's the idea. Like, there's other bits that we'll come on to maybe, but that's essentially the vision I wanted to share with you. And I'd like to give you a chance to respond a little bit before I finish up. Have I bamboozled you completely? Shall I just tell you the end of the story? Is that what you want? You okay for a bit more? I just know this is kind of stuff, and I don't want you to be completely like sitting there going, I have no idea what's going on now. Have I done so far? Tell me the truth. In Dutch. Yeah? Has it been all right? Has it made sense?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I think there's an even more far out bit coming. I really do. I think it's happening now already. I don't think soul actually is the leading edge. I think soul has been the leading edge, but I think there's something new happening, and I think it's been happening for a while, but very, very small, and now it's happening a bit more. Quite a bit more. It's still very small, but it's happening quite a bit more. And that is awakening. I think actually spiritual awakening is the leading edge of the evolutionary process. And let me describe what I think spiritual awakening actually is. When I teach spiritual awakening, it's going to be very fast, because it's a whole other subject. One of the things which I do now to start it off is just go, look, what we're looking at is the obvious. And spiritual awakening is going, look at the moment, see the obvious. So see right now, you are body, and you experience that as sensation. That's clear. And see also that you are soul. You experience imagination. That's really clear. You're body and soul. There's no debate about it. It's a fact. No one can miss that. Then, the question is, well, if there's this flow of sensation and this flow of imagination, what is the experiencer? What's experiencing that? What is the thing we call I? And to put the whole of the mystical traditions of the world, which I've written, whatever it is, 35 books on, just within a few sentences, I'd say that the deep mystical traditions, the message is the same, which is your deepest being, the thing which is what you are, not what you're experiencing, has no form. It's formless. It's formless being. And it's formless because it has no colour. It's looking at colour right now, but the thing which is looking has no colour. It's listening to sound, but the thing which is listening makes no noise. It's thinking, but it's not a thought. It's before experience.
Can we have just 1 minute maybe of this experience, what you're describing actually? Maybe it is more interesting to...
You want to jump into that? Drop into it?
Yeah, because I found it quite in the head now, but it could be more practical and more experiential if we could just sense.
I know. I was coming here tomorrow to do a whole experiential thing,
really?
but no one wanted to come, so they cancelled it.
Really?
Yeah,
So
whole experiential. Well, we'll come back to it because although I would love to do that, and you can do it right now.
Yeah, just 1 minute.
What I want to do really is just finish the story. So I need to do this quick.
Go ahead.
But if you are conscious of it now, it does only take a moment. It's actually the most obvious thing.
I was thinking of the group, but that's okay.
Which is that there is the presence of your being, which is looking, but which has no form, has no colour, has no shape. And it's something which, and I will talk about this when I've done the next bit, which you can experience quite quickly, actually. And it's very, very clear once you do, if you paid attention. So that's the fundamental of what spiritual awakening is, and that's called spirit. So body, soul, spirit, or essence, or being, or whatever word you want to give that. What I think is happening with that is that what we're becoming conscious of is the potentiality from which everything's arising. Because the potentiality is manifesting itself as everything that is, and is also, of course, experiencing itself as everything that is. So what's happening is that this flow of experience is time, which is why it changes. And body is in time, soul is time. But the experiencer is not time. The experiencer just is. It's timeless. Because it has no qualities to change. Just being. It's the formless presence of being. Everything has arisen from spirit, from essence, from the potentiality. And behind everything, that is there. Spirit is experiencing itself as literally everything. The plants and everything. You and me. Which is why this deep teaching at the heart of spirituality, which is look outwards into time and we're all separate. Look backwards into being and it's all one. Come out here into time, I'm you, you're me. Sorry, the other way around. That's true too, but never mind. And we're individuals. Take your attention back into this depths of being, into this vast emptiness, and there's one of us. Because it's all one. There's just one being. So that what's happening, it seems to me, is that with some souls that are ready, we are becoming conscious enough. Things throughout the whole process have got more and more and more conscious. Until we're conscious enough that we can be conscious of our being. Of this fundamental oneness. This formless, timeless presence from which everything is arising and which we are. So that I can stand here now and be, oh my goodness, I'm both this formless, timeless oneness and I'm Tim. And I'm meeting you, and you are also the formless, timeless oneness, but you're you. And here we're separate and different, and here there's one of us. So that what's happening is the potentiality, which is an unconscious oneness. Unconscious because it's un-everything. It's just un. It's nothing. It's the potentiality for everything. The unconscious oneness has manifested as the manyness. And as it has, it's become more and more conscious through each individual form until it's reached you and me. Where it is so conscious, it can be conscious of itself. At which point, the unconscious oneness becomes conscious oneness. And the flower at the end of the process of evolution is that the unconscious oneness of potentiality is now becoming conscious of itself. This conscious oneness is arising from the conscious manyness. So the whole journey, and this is a journey which I've traced back to ancient mythology, interestingly enough. You find it in the Gnostic mythology, for instance. The fundamental journey is from unconscious oneness through conscious separateness to conscious oneness. And the conscious oneness transcends and includes everything that's been before. It includes everything that's ever happened, because everything's made of the past. So that through time we become conscious of something beyond time, which is our own deepest being. Yeah?
Can you tell us something about suffering in our journey?
Yeah. Great. Okay, that's where I started, wasn't it? The world's full of suffering. Maybe we can put a different idea in it. Yeah. It seems to me that what we experience as suffering is the different levels of emergence. So there's the suffering that's happening in the Gulf of Mexico right now, where there's physical weather phenomena which cause chaos. There's suffering when our bodies fail. There's that suffering, because we've then developed this ability for pleasure and pain, which is an evolutionary motor, actually, towards survival of the species. We live with that. And then there's this other level where we tell stories in soul. And there again, within the story, there's stories which give us pleasure, and then there's stories which break our hearts. So suffering, it seems to me, is just this pullback, which is always there. I call it passivity, the idea that the past is constantly pulling us back. It's like a weight to it. I think we all experience that. So that there's a kind of like, there's a Tim's, you know, I had toothache when I was in America. And it was like, oh my God, you know, if this carries on, I'd sell my kids to get rid of it. It's like, you know, awful pain. And you can feel, oh, it's my body. You know, my body has developed these things. And so there's that level. And then there's these stories we tell where they break down. Where they break down. But what is happening at each of those levels is the stresses that they create also create the motor of evolution, I think. They actually push us forward. So that if you get to the soul level, you know, one of the things which people often think when they think, oh, there's that moment where you go, really, yeah, I am everything I've experienced. But there's also a kind of feeling of, oh God, well, I keep doing the same things, and there's that, you know, I'm stuck with myself. I'm stuck with all that suffering which I've had, and my feeling is that's not true. My feeling is we're actually creative with it, so that we transform our understanding of it, and so that we don't get caught in cycles of suffering. We can actually transmute what's happened in the past, so that it's new and takes us forward. I'm wondering, tell me more what your question is. I feel like I'm missing what you're saying. I don't want to miss why you're answering that.
For me, you're not so missing. It's for me, I wonder why we or I, to be happy and also have moments from suffering. Why? Yeah. You're learning from it.
Okay, so I'm not. So here's one thing which might help, which seems relevant to me, is what I'm not saying is that the universe it's all meant to be. What I'm not saying is that all the way through, it's like, well, why is there suffering? Well, there's suffering because in the biological process that developed the body, pleasure and pain developed. No one planned it. There was no blueprint. There was no one at the front going, you know, right, let there be pleasure and pain. It's like, why? Well, you know, I don't know, I fancy it. There's none of that. It's arisen. Why? Because it's a good mechanism. It's a good mechanism for getting biological entities to avoid death, to reproduce, to eat, to do all the things they need to do. So we're now stuck with that. It just happened that way. You know, a bit like, you know, why are guys hairy, and, you know, why have we got two legs, and wouldn't it be great if bodies had pockets, and all of that sort of stuff. It's like, it would, wouldn't it? Kangaroos, I tell you, they had the idea. Let's have a pocket. Brilliant. Genius. But obviously there's no one doing that. So it's not like, why is there? If there's a God at the beginning of time, then it's like, well, why is there suffering? But what I'm suggesting is there is no God at the beginning of time. There's a natural process of evolution in which suffering has arisen because it's been a motor. And then it's taken off onto the soul level. Now it's on a different level. Now suffering plays a different role, it seems to me. The soul suffering. It can be equally arbitrary, but it's that can play a role in moving us on. It can play a role in pushing us back. It's the same thing, but on a different arc, like all imagination is. But it's not something which we need to go, but why is it there? Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say? That it's more like, well, it's just arisen in the flow of things, like all polarities. And there's a tendency, obviously, always, if there's going to be one, there'll be the opposite. So the nervous system developed pleasure, and at the same time it developed pain. And the same, we develop joy, and at the same time we develop sorrow. We develop those things as we go through. So, and it plays a role, but it's not like, well, it needed to be there because it did this. Do you understand what I'm trying to say there? I feel I'm not being very articulate with this question. Maybe I should talk about God. Because I think rooted into the things like, it's why is there suffering, or what is like, because when someone says, well, the reason there's suffering is because it plays this role, it feels like, well, that means it's been created by somebody. There's been some plan behind it. I don't think that works. So I'm going to end with God. Shall I do that? Is that all right? Does anyone want to bring up anything else before I go to God? Yeah, go on.
Do you have any idea what's there?
Yes.
Okay.
God. Okay. I'll do God to finish up, and then we can just sit and chat if you want to, or we can have a cup of tea, or we can do what you like. We're here on our own. We can do whatever we want. And thanks for coming, folks. Thank you. I really appreciate you turning out. Let's end with God, the last 10 minutes. So, my experience... Well, I woke up, my first awakening when I was 12. No, before we do God, I'm going to do this. You talked about the experience, and I haven't had time to do anything experiential tonight, and if I had longer I would, because actually what I love to do, and many people here know this, is to take people into the experience of spiritual awakening. And the experience of spiritual awakening is a profound experience of the deep goodness of existence under all the suffering. That real, which arises because this is moving towards the good. And it's an experience in which there is immense love. Overwhelmingly, it's an experience of all-embracing love. Why? Because the love is how the oneness feels. When we enter a state of connection, of oneness, it feels like love. That's what love is. If you think about anyone you love, it's because you feel a communion with them. And if you wake up to your deep being, which is one with everything, there's this profound oneness which holds everything together. And you find yourself in love with everything and everyone. Doesn't mean you like everything or everyone. It's not liking. It's deeper than that. It's love. And that love is not all fluffy and pink, although I do like fluffy pink love. But it's not just that. It's also very deep, isn't it? Real love is very big. You know, the example I always get whenever I think of it is sitting with my mum when she was dying a few years back. And that huge love which just held us in that place of such suffering. So it's awful. And yet there was this huge, beautiful, magic love which held us even in the middle of all of that. Love is it's a huge thing in its deepest form. It's the most emergent thing, which is, love has come last. It started with hydrogen, it's ended with love. That's why there's not enough of it in the world. Plenty of hydrogen, not enough love. But the love's only coming in. It's just coming in now. There'll be enough love, but not for a while. It's coming. It's coming now. It's the most emergent thing. It's the last thing to arrive. The deepest things arrive last. So my favourite thing is to take us into the deepest thing, which now, and on your chairs, there is a leaflet. Please take it. If you know of anyone who might want to know, or you've got somewhere you can put some leaflets, please take some of the leaflets which are on the table. My big problem, because I'm in the UK, is I just want to tell people this is available to them. Simple as that. But I am running this retreat, and my aim will be, we've got a beautiful, beautiful place. It's an old convent, but it's very light and airy, and the room we're in is beautiful. It won't be huge, it'll be personal. We'll get to be with each other. And I will go through some ideas, but primarily we'll be doing practical things. We'll be going into ways in which we can directly see this oneness, how we can experience this love. And my intention will be, my intention will be that every single person who comes leaves having had the experience of the deep awake state for themselves. Not like, oh, I get it, because that's just the introduction. But, oh, I get it. Okay. That's the aim. I feel it. That love is like something reaches right down into the body. And by and large, I think I can pretty much guarantee that there's a good chance you will, having done it with hundreds and hundreds of people all over the world. So if you would like to experience this leading edge of the evolutionary process for yourself, if you'd like to know that oneness and feel the big love that arises from it, here is an opportunity for you to do that. If something calls you, if you want more information, talk to me, or there's other people here who've had the experience with me. Each time we go deeper. Keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper. And the way we're going to do it is very, very simple. We're going to use meditation. but in a very interesting way. Meditation, what is that? It's when you take your attention and you place it on your being. Simple as that. So you close down your senses, you stop looking at time, and you put your attention on the timeless presence. And that's an amazing thing to do. I'm sure everyone here has done that before. Here's an even more amazing thing to do, or just as amazing, which is to take your attention and focus on the being in another person. So right now, you're seeing me. You see my face. There it is. Here's Tim. I see you. Lovely face. But what I'm connecting with, I can't see it. I'm connecting with conscious being looking back at me. That thing that can't be seen. I'm connecting with formless being. And it's happening all the time. Right, all the time, formless being is connecting with formless being through form. The oneness is connecting with the oneness through two-ness. Something you can't see is connecting with something you can't see through looking. And that's happening all the time. Happening through listening. Happens through touch. Happens through all the senses. Something which is beyond the senses is connecting with itself through the senses. So what I have found is the most powerful thing we can do is just pay attention to that in a comfortable, relaxed, playful environment. And if we're relaxed enough and we just be ourselves and we feel comfortable and we really pay attention, magic happens. Because you start to become increasingly aware of this ocean of oneness, which is behind the separateness. Not instead of it, but as well. And then actually the separateness becomes cool. It becomes more colourful and interesting, and you'll start seeing, and everyone is like, wow, you're so you. That's amazing. Because behind it, there's this big ocean of oneness. So we do that through all the senses, listening, simple touch, movement, and gazing, which I've been doing for the last 20 years. It's really caught on over the last sort of 5, I'm glad to say. And what I'll do at this event, I used never to tell people because they get too frightened. One of my favourite responses after the retreat, I get these lovely emails. And I think I'll put this one in my book, Soul Story, which is the Dutch book, which is here. Someone emailed me afterwards and said, if you told me what we were going to do, I would have run 1,000 miles. But if you told me how it was going to feel, I'd have walked over hot coals to be there. And that's the way it is. But I'm going to take a risk with you guys and tell you what we're going to do. What we're going to do on the Saturday night, having done a whole load of things to get us to settle in and to relax and to be ourselves and to just, let go of all the spiritual bullshit, just really get into some deep being and playing, is we'll create a beautiful environment, we'll play beautiful music, and we'll spend the evening connecting soul to soul, deep eye to deep eye, with each other. So you'll meet one person, you'll sit with them for a short while, maybe 2.5 minutes, something like that, and go, whoa. And then you'll meet them, oh my God. And then, oh my God. And you'll do that with everyone present. And what happens is extraordinary. What happens is that very quickly from, well, this is a bit strange, you've kind of got rid of that earlier on in the day, really. By the time we do it, it'll be fine. What happens is you suddenly it is just, to me, I've never, I've just did it 140 people in Italy, outside under the moonlight. It was just exquisite. It's just such love, such presence, such beauty that you see in every single person. And at a certain point in the circle, you realize they're seeing it in you. They're looking in your eyes and going, wow, you're beautiful. Because you are. Because you really are. So it's an amazing experience. It's not one you'll have the chance to have every day. If you want to come and grab it, then speak to Sabina here, because she's organising this whole event for me. Can you put your just wave and woo? She's just there. And if you want to know any questions about it, come and ask. So that's where we can really get into the experiential heart. But to end our little mind journey, which we've been on, we've got 5 minutes, which is perfect for God. God, difficult word. If there's anyone here who's had a horrible upbringing around Christianity and is going, don't keep saying that word, it's bad enough you use the word soul. Stop using that word. I understand. I meet lots of people like that. I'm going to use the word because it's provocative. If you don't like the word, use a different one. Just think a different word. Here's my problem with God. When I was a little boy, I had my first deep awake experience. I experienced the oneness, I experienced the love, all the colours lit up. It was like there was like such goodness. I felt immortal. All the things which characterize the deep awake state. It's like, oh my goodness, what's just happened? I was 12 years old. I had no idea what happened. And so I thought, oh, this is God. Because that's what I had to hand. It was like, well, I'm experiencing God. And for most of my early life, and quite a way into, till I really took on philosophy in a deep sense, I would say I had huge experiences of God. And really, I carried on having them. Lots of people do. And what I mean by that is, it feels like when I enter that deep awake state, it's not like the oneness is it feels like the oneness is alive. It feels like the oneness is a bigger being of which I am a part. It feels like I'm connecting with something transcendent, bigger than me. And its characteristic, it is full of goodness and full of love. And it really wants the best for me. And it's right there in my most difficult times of suffering. And like, it held me when my mum was, all of that. And that, I think, is what people experience when they talk about divinity or God or some higher being. Here's the problem, though. Theology has continually thought of God as existing at the beginning of time, as the creator. Okay. There is a massive problem with God at the beginning of time. And it's what you said. It's suffering. Because if God is at the beginning of time, I don't like him. I really don't like him, or her, or it. Because it seems to me it is incomprehensible that a God that's all good and all powerful and all loving and all the things that God is meant to be could create a world in which right now I know that innocent babies are being eaten from the inside by parasites. That's impossible to make sense of. That there is suffering on such a scale. That a God who has created this whole thing such that one afternoon a whole island was flattened. That God I want to have words with. It's a very Gnostic view of God. It's like, no, he's a bastard. I don't like him. We should war against this God. Since the development of science, we have another problem, which is that's the traditional problem. That's known in theology as the problem of evil. Why is there evil in the world if there's a good God? It's impossible to answer. The other problem we've got now is what I call the problem of absurdity, which is now we know there's 13.8 billion years of evolution. Why would God do that? And why would it include 120 million years of dinosaurs? What, if you wanted to get to soul and us doing this, why would you do that? That's nuts. And why would you have 5 extinction periods? And do we really need 360,000 variety of beetle? What's that about? None of it makes any sense, does it? Which is why science has ended up going, there is no God. It's not like that. It's a natural process. It's just happening and developing. And that makes a lot more sense to me. A lot more sense. But what I want to suggest to you is that we've been putting God in the wrong place. And that God isn't the beginning of time. At the beginning of time is the formless, timeless potentiality. What I want to suggest is that God's not at the beginning, God is at the end. God is where this is going. God is what is coming now. Because this journey is one from unconscious oneness through conscious separateness to conscious oneness. And God is the conscious oneness. The deepest things arrive last. Not first, last. Didn't start with love, started with hydrogen, ended with love. The deepest things arrive last. Why is there so much suffering in history? Because human beings have not been as conscious. Now we're developing the idea that we should treat each other well and shouldn't just put our babies out to die if they're deformed, or all of these, justice, equality. These are all really recent, because the deepest things arrive last. So here's the possibility I'll just end with, just to allow it to sink into you and just see if it resonates. My intuition, personally, is this. At a certain point, all these cells came together in a oneness and created something more than themselves, which was Tim's body, a human body. Every period of this evolution has been marked by that. Like I said, hydrogen and oxygen at one point came together and something greater, a greater unity arose. There's been constantly, greater unity, greater unity, greater unity. My intuition is that what is happening right now as we awaken, especially in the after-death state actually, but as we awaken, we are creating a communion of souls in which we are both individual souls and we are all one. And in that all oneness, in that conscious oneness, a new level of emergence is arising, which is a transcendent being made of souls. And one of the ancient words for that is God. That there is a being which is marked by what? By love, because love is how oneness feels. And it's the oneness of soul. And when we tap into it, we become part of it. So that God is not where this has come from, God is where this is going. And that being of love is not all-powerful running the show. That being of love is the flower at the end of the process, with its roots in potentiality, its leaves in biology, flowering into divinity. And we can experience that. So that the final thing I'm wanting to say with this grand story of evolution and why it feels meaningful to me is that this is literally the creation of God. This is the creation of that transcendent being of love made of soul. And I don't know what it's like to be God any more than a cell in my body knows what it's like to be me. But I do know exactly what it feels like to commune in God. And that feels like love. That feels like the only time I feel like this is perfect. When I when I commune in that oneness, it's perfect. Doesn't matter about anything. It's perfect. There is such goodness. There is such love that even the worst of things is okay. There's room for everything. Because that just holds the whole process right the way through. And redeems it. It redeems the suffering because it has led to the being of love. And that's where it feels we're going. And we can play a role in that by awakening to our deepest being and by realizing the deepest potentiality of our souls. So, thank you very, very much for all of your kind attention and listening so intently. It's been a great delight. I'm so pleased I came to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim.